Welcome to Focus on Why. I'm Amy Rowlandson, your host. Join me to explore the compelling stories, profound insights, and captivating experiences shared by my guests from all over the world. Focusing on the importance of why, these relatable, uplifting, and inspiring conversations will empower, motivate, and guide you to create your own purposeful way of life. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why. Before we dive in, are you considering creating a podcast, or are you already hosting one, but it's not producing the results you desire? As a podcast strategist, I can help you launch or relaunch a purposeful and profitable podcast that will inspire, entertain, and educate a global audience. Book a call with me today. The link is in the show notes, and let's transform your podcast vision into reality. Today on Focus on Why, I am joined by Dr. Nuthana PB. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Amy.
Oh, it's been such an exciting wait for me, at least, for you to come on the show. So I'm very excited for you to finally be here. It's great. And what is it that you are focusing on at the moment?
Great question. So for me at the moment, I'm focusing on climate change and health. So climate change is the biggest threat to health worldwide, and there's a real overlap between climate change and health because we're recording this at the end of June, where summer has finally arrived in the UK, but we've got a bit of a heat wave. And with climate change, we're likely to have more extreme temperature events around the world, more flooding, increased air pollution levels, which is a huge cause of premature deaths worldwide. So there's lots of ways in which climate change affects health, but also our healthcare systems are a huge contributor to the carbon footprint. So the NHS, if it was a country, it would be quite really high in terms of the carbon footprint that it produces. And I think about 5% of the carbon footprint of the whole UK. So one of the best things we can do is to empower people to be healthy and thriving so that they don't need to use healthcare systems. And then that reduces the carbon footprint from healthcare. So I've kind of said two whys, but they're really linked together. So all about climate change and health, really.
It's so interesting because I wouldn't necessarily have put them together, but the way you've just described it, it's almost embarrassing that I hadn't thought about the impact of one upon the other, because it's huge and it makes perfect sense when you've just spoken about it. What's your role within healthcare or climate change? I mean, both. What is your role currently?
So I guess all of us have a role, really, regardless of whether we work in healthcare or not. So the NHS, it became the first healthcare system around the world to say that climate change was an emergency and to come up with a net zero plan. So the NHS wants to deliver a net zero health service by 2040. So what does that mean, being a net zero health service? It means that we're not emitting more than what's coming in, essentially. So it's all about equalising, reducing the emissions from the healthcare system. And my role at the moment, I'm working as a sustainability fellow. So that's great because I get to spend my time actually thinking about how do we get sustainability into the NHS and specific projects that are working on embedding sustainability or reducing the carbon footprint. And I'm on the verge of a chapter change. So by the time this comes out, I will be a public health doctor, but I've been a paediatric doctor for the last few years. And it's a big change, and it's taken a while for me to make that decision. But the reason that I'm making it is because I really care about us focusing on climate change and health and the intersection between the two. And I feel that I will be able to do more of that as a public health doctor.
Well, congratulations for stepping up and into this new chapter. It sounds incredible. And what I want to just go back and quickly ask, because I didn't ask the question, was You said about empowering people to be healthy so that we're all taking responsibility for our own health, and that will help the NHS as a whole to move towards this net zero plan that they've got for 2040. How easy or how big of an ask is that of people to remain or sustain health?
Yeah, really good question. So I think for me, whenever I think about these things, I like to think about it as systems and as individuals. So the way that our healthcare system is set up, and I'll start by saying I'm so grateful that we have the National Health Service. It's 76 years old now, and it was set up so that people could have healthcare free at the point of access. And I think that's amazing. And I think we take it for granted quite a lot. So I just want to really acknowledge how lucky we are to have the National Health Service. But when it was set up, 76 years ago, it was the disease people were dealing with, the population, it was all quite different. Now, because we've had so many advances in healthcare and medical technology, which is amazing, people are living longer with more long-term conditions. So that's a much bigger burden on the health service than what was envisaged at the beginning, that, they'll kind of deal with acute things. But what about the long-term stuff? And along with that, the funding hasn't necessarily increased. So I think because of the constraints that we're under, we're really having to run what would really be described more as a disease service rather than a health service. So if someone has an issue and they go to the NHS, then absolutely we can do something for them. But everything is very much based on disease. And the last few years, what I've really felt is we should be focusing on health, and how do we educate and empower people to look after their own health so that they then don't develop these long-term conditions. And so I'd say with that, it's a system, like the way we've set up the system is an issue there, because it's all focused on disease rather than health. But I don't like just saying, oh, well, it's a system issue, because I find that quite disempowering. And I think systems are made up of individuals, and we should never underestimate how much change we can make as individuals. And I completely understand that it isn't easy. We're in a cost of living crisis. It's, I suppose, easy to say, oh, you should eat healthily and organic food is best and la da da, but that isn't possible for everybody. So I think you have to be really mindful of all of those factors. But I think each of us can, if we get the right education and empowerment, then we can go and do things so that whatever our means are, within that, we can look after ourselves and look after our health. And I think it's really important for everyone to feel that they are the architect of their health. That doesn't mean that they're in, we don't have control over our bodies, and suddenly we develop something, and we can't control those things. So it's not about putting blame on individuals, but it's to help individuals see that, yeah, I can control my health and I can go and do X, Y, and Z, and then that will help me to be healthier. And I think that that's really important, and that's something that that I don't really see happening now, and I would really like to be doing that.
So, in your role as public health doctor, do you have hands-on contact with patients still?
No, so I won't be. So it'll be more, well, I say I won't. And the reason I say that is because it's more focused on populations rather than individual patients. But I will still be working with patient groups. I'm not just going to be sitting in an office somewhere, not actually interacting with anybody. Um, and I think that is the aspect of it that took me quite a long time to make the decision, because I love interacting with patients. And being a pediatric doctor, I'm so used to interacting with, babies, children, anyone from 0 to 18, and then, of course, their families within pediatrics. And that's the favourite part of the job, is getting to interact with them. So it's been, that was the biggest thing that I was like, oh, I don't know, I'm going to really miss that I'm not interacting with people all the time. But then there's other positives that you're having an impact on a whole population at a bigger level. So at the moment, one of the projects that I'm working on is to embed sustainability into the National Women's Health Strategy. So we've got a women's health strategy that was developed in England in 2022, and that's great that we've got that strategy. It covers the whole life course of women's health, but they hadn't included anything about sustainability. And so what was great was I could be like, oh, I'm really interested in doing this, and they've been really keen for me to do that as well. And so that feels really great because if I can get that into there, that will help lots more people than me just seeing one person one-to-one. So it's about making even a small difference to a bigger group of people versus seeing one patient and making a massive difference to them. So I think it's very different ways of thinking about things.
Yeah, and because you've done it the way you've done it, you can picture in your mind the individuals when you're thinking about the entirety of the population. You can still in your mind think about, okay, well, this is how this is going to filter through and make a difference. And you spoke about when it was created 76 years ago that it is now a bigger burden than was envisaged. What is your vision for the future?
Oh, I love that question. My vision for the future is that we have a very green and thriving planet, and all the humans on it are very joyful and thriving. That's how I would love the world to be. I'd love for everybody to be joyful and thriving, and yeah, for the planet to be thriving as well. And I don't think those things can happen individually. They can only happen together.
I totally agree. So change begins with the individual is the message I'm hearing, but it's going to take collaborative approaches for it to work.
Yes, absolutely. And I did a course about leadership in sustainability recently, and there was a really lovely quote that's really stayed with me. And it was, sometimes we can feel overwhelmed of like, but I'm only one person. How on earth climate change is this huge thing that actually started years ago, but it's just getting worse and worse. How on earth am I going to solve it all as one person? And of course, I'm not trying to solve it just as me. But also, the quote was, yes, I am only one, but I am one. And I thought that was beautiful because it's like, yes, you can get overwhelmed for any of us thinking about, big things that we want to change. Oh my goodness, I'm only one person. But then that reminder of, yes, but I am one person, and me doing this is one more person than if I wasn't doing it.
Yeah, no, I love that. It's a beautiful phrase actually, and it's such a simple one with simple words, and yet they resonate hugely, particularly with the topic of purpose and what the the work that you're looking to do here, where you are bringing together these inseparable pieces of the planet and the people, essentially, and how we are all interconnected. And the work that you're doing is, yes, I am one, but I am one. It asserts your own empowerment and your ability to make a difference. What does purpose mean to you, Nuthana?
I love your questions, first of all, they're great. What does purpose mean to me? I guess for me, it's the thing that makes me jump out of bed and want to do things in the morning. But also, I'm really reminded of Mary Oliver's quote, the summer day. So we're recording this just a few days after it's been the summer solstice, and so it's officially the start of summer. And thankfully, it feels like summer has arrived in the UK as well. But I love that whole quote, and I highly recommend if anyone's listening and isn't familiar, definitely look up the poem. And I don't remember the whole poem off by heart, but at the end, she says, um, doesn't everything die at last and too soon? So tell me, what else should I have done? What should I have done with my one wild and precious life? And I absolutely love that line. Like I actually put it on my email signature. not even for like the person that's receiving it to see, just for me to see it every time I'm sending an email, to be reminded that we only have one wild and precious life. And so I guess I don't know if it's a bit morbid, but sometimes I kind of think like, well, if I was at the end of my life, or if you've got like 1 year to live or whatever, then what would you really want to do? And at the end of my life, looking back, what difference would I have wanted to make? I find that quite helpful to think about. I appreciate it's quite morbid, but it is helpful to think, actually, yeah, I've got X amount of who knows how much time, but in that time, what is it what is the difference that I want to make? So I think that's how I think about purpose.
I don't know whether it's because I talk about this topic so much that I have a more of an acceptance about our mortality. That's not to say that it doesn't upset me or make me feel quite emotional. Well, not quite even, emotional about the whole prospect. But it really does remind me, as you've just said, that we don't know when our life is going to end. And so if it should, are we doing what we're doing today as being something that is going to be of relevance, impact, legacy, whatever it is? It could be tomorrow our last day. So every day matters. And I see so many people living their lives as though they've got 1,000 lifetimes, and they're always putting off things for another day, or it just seems like they've got so much time. And what that poem does certainly is just remind us that there will be no moment like this one or this one. It's gone, right? So yes, that's your answer to purpose. In terms of why, I see them differently, and to help you understand the differences, purpose being the overarching intention that guides your direction in life, and it's whatever you choose it to be. The why is the emotional significance that you're assigning to that purpose. So what is it that has come about for you that gives you the emotional drive to achieve and to act upon your purpose?
Again, another amazing question. I'm kind of thinking, oh, did I actually answer what purpose was and why? There's just loads going on in my head. I guess what makes me want to work on the purpose is I kind of feel like we're so lucky to actually, to be alive, but also I've had like the privilege of having an education and being encouraged to go and learn things. And for me, there's always been a sense of service, and I don't think I can take credit for that, because that's definitely how my parents have brought me up. And a value in the family that everything has been about service. And so everything's always about, how can I serve other people more, rather than, like, it's always external facing rather than how is this going to help me. And that isn't to say that we shouldn't do things, that we should only do things thinking about other people. It's just, for me, that's where my motivation comes from. And the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, so a group of things that the UN came up with, that I actually can't remember what year then I was supposed to be achieving them by. I think it might be 2030, but it keeps getting pushed back. And I first heard about those as a child, from my dad, who is an economist and works in public policy, and also does quite a lot about climate change, actually. And he was telling me that he was teaching his students about these sustainable development goals. And the United Nations came up with them as, this is how we're going to help the planet and everybody. And within there are things like the importance of gender equality, getting rid of hunger, looking after children, children being in education, looking after the planet in terms of sort of like trees and creatures that live on land, but also thinking about ocean life. And when I look at everything that and I only realized this recently, but when I look at everything that I've been involved in since I was a child being told about these, it's all been linked to the Sustainable Development Goals. So that conversation that I had clearly had a profound impact on me. That everything that I've done has been about that. And I was thinking about this the other day because I thought, oh, I do like lots of things about different things, and I seem to have quite a few different whys, but this is how they all link together. I do work on gender equity because that's really important to me, and that also links with this. So yeah, there's lots of different things that I might do, but I guess that's what they pertain to. So I guess in answer, I'm not even sure I've answered your question, but I guess the main things for me are thinking about service and yeah, underpinned by the Sustainable Development Goals.
Absolutely. And it's so interesting because one of the people who were involved in fleshing out what those sustainability development goals were going to be with the UN is my next guest on the next podcast, Piran Desai, who was one of those founders of putting that together. And he's now taken that and reduced it down to 12 for one planet. So it's so interesting. I'm going to pick up on a couple of things that you mentioned there. Firstly, just so you know, my definition of purpose and why is just mine. Okay, so I want that it's for me to help myself discern a difference, to know they're interconnected, but they are separate. And it's, again, very subjective. What does it mean? It's for you to choose. So whatever it means, absolutely. Take it and make sure that it sits with you, and it's great. And so there's no right or wrong answer here. I just want to make that clear to everyone who's listening. Absolutely, service is intrinsically involved. For me, my perspective of this, having this outward focus and linking it heavily to what's driving you from an intrinsic perspective. And you mentioned that it's been a value that you were brought up with your parents, and it's interesting. So societal and a familial influences, how much of that sort of growing up versus where you are now is similar? Is it the same, or have you moved on and evolved and got your own way of values now?
I think quite a few of the values have still stayed the same. So there's always been an encouragement of learning. My parents are both academics and come from a family of people who are very interested in science and learning. And so it was always encouraged from like a young age. And I loved like going to museums and like reading books. And I still spend a lot of my free time now doing those things. I love learning new things, constantly doing different courses. Probably like I actually think I need to look at my time and energy and yeah, kind of discern a bit more, I think. But I kind of just like, but I want to do everything and I want to learn everything and I want to like go out and see the whole world. So learning is definitely a really high value. And so learning and growth, I guess, they kind of go together for me. But I think those are really important. And yeah, we're recording this. It's my birthday in a few weeks, and I always get quite reflective at this time of year because it always makes me think of looking back over the last year and what things have happened and how I've changed and grown. And also at the end of every year when it's the new year. And it's so funny because every time I think, oh, I'm so different to how I was last year. Which is good because we don't want to be the same person that we were the previous year. And I guess that links to what you were saying about purpose and why as well, that those things, we all have our own definition, but they can also be fluid. So for me, a couple of years ago, I felt that my purpose was all about all focused on children and getting children healthier, because if we get them healthier when they're children, then they'll be healthier throughout the rest of their life course. And that is still part of the purpose, but it's expanded now to not just be about children, but about everybody. and then it's expanded more from kind of humans to thinking about the planet as well. So I just sort of wanted to mention that there is that fluidity. So yeah, growth and learning are definitely big values that I feel like they've just been around forever, that was encouraged as a child, and then I've really kept with those. Um, and then I think fun is one that I probably lost touch of for a few years. So as a child, I think all of us, like, we're just intrinsically here to have fun, and children are so present and curious and absolutely able to find joy in any situation. Um, and then I think when I was really focused on like getting into medical school and then being at medical school, um, I think I probably took life a bit too seriously, and yeah, just really felt that I had to work super hard, and um, I think at that time my sense of self-worth was really linked to my achievements. And if I didn't do very well in an exam at medical school, I made it mean that I wasn't worthy. And that was probably running the show without me realizing for quite a few years. Um, and then I burnt out around 2020. Um, Great timing with a global pandemic. But that was when I kind of really took stock and took a bit of a pause and really um, learned the really important lesson that you have to look after yourself first. And I know we get told that, put on your own oxygen mask first, but societally, we live in a society where we congratulate people on being martyrs, particularly within the NHS. It's very much a culture of, you're told from the first day of medical school that the care of your patient is your first concern. And absolutely, that is true. If there's an emergency, then yes, absolutely run to your patient and they are your first concern. But we can't look after anyone long term if we don't look after ourselves first. And the General Medical Council, who are there to regulate doctors on behalf of patients, their job is to keep the public safe. In good medical practice, which is like the code of practice that all doctors should be following, that has been updated in the last couple of years and actually includes something that says that it's a doctor's responsibility to look after themselves and their own health. So I think that's great that it's in there because it's so important. But I think that whole journey really made me realize that I need to reconnect with that joy. And joy is absolutely one of my highest values. And of course, we can't be joyful all the time. I wish we could. I have, I I like joy. I don't really like feeling sad. I'm not sure anybody really does, but they kind of go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. We need that whole spectrum of emotions. But I guess, yeah, one thing that I've really realized in the last few years is to really find that joy. And it doesn't mean that, you can find joy anywhere. In the mornings when I go and like look outside my window, that brings me joy. Having a nice cup of tea, like all sorts of like little things, the little moments. Um, and I guess some of that maybe comes with a bit of wisdom and life experience. So I guess that's ways in which the values have changed, but mostly it feels like it's the same core values, but my understanding of them and what drives those values has changed over the years.
It's such a fascinating topic, isn't it? How influential the values are, and you're aware of what's driving you, of what you're motivated by, what gives you pleasure and joy, and yet the I would say is not necessarily the norm for the population. And if we're talking about population, do you think that everybody knows what's driving them?
No, I don't think we all do. And I'm not sure that I do half the time either. Because I guess it takes, so much of that 95% of what's running us is unconscious. And unless we actually sit and go and do some exploring of that, then we don't know. So yeah, I guess maybe this is part of my purpose, or will become part of my purpose, because I did say earlier that I want everybody to be joyful and thriving. Um, but maybe everybody doesn't need to sit and understand exactly what's driving them. But I think everyone can spend a few minutes thinking about what are the little things that make them happy, and it'll be slightly different for each person. But I suspect for a lot of people, it will be things like spending time with loved ones, spending time out in nature, because these are kind of universal things that as humans, we're hardwired for connection, and connection and relationships are such a big part of health as well, that when there's a beautiful long study done at Harvard, the kind of longest study of humans over time. I think they've reached 80 plus years now, and in that they've shown how important relationships are for our health. So I think there's that about relationships, but also in terms of spending time out in nature, because we are part of nature. We live in these urban, non-nature things. We kind of forget that we are part of nature, but spending any time out in nature, I always feel like I come back with so many life lessons. And just a few weeks ago, I bought myself some peonies, and in the 2 weeks that I had with those peonies, they taught me so many lessons. And I think that's the beautiful thing about nature, and that's why there's so many studies that show how important it is to spend time in nature, and that is good for our health, not only our physical health, but also our mental health. Um, because it's really calming, and I think it reminds us of the big picture. We get so focused on like our little part of the world and what little thing we're doing in the world, that sometimes it's really nice just to go and get the bigger picture perspective.
I'm with you. I mean, nature is the biggest research and development system and business or mechanism that there is. It's had millions of years of evolution of what's worked, what's not worked, and absolutely the lessons are there. And I spoke, maybe it was I think it was last year. I'd been waiting for a magnolia tree that I had in a pot to flower, and I finally planted it into the ground. And literally within weeks, I had three beautiful flowers, but they lasted for 2, 3 days, and then they're gone. And 12 years for 3 days and I've got one coming up again now. So it's funny, isn't it? It is about what is around us. Yes, we are nature. We forget that. We've become separated. I've talked about this with other guests. Nicola Peel, we talk about how if you asked an Indigenous person, they wouldn't even understand the question, what is nature? Because it's just everything. And I get it. And I'm learning that. And I'm careful to sort of separate out the natural world from ourselves, from nature, because that can be a difference in what is man-made and what is natural. You're running by the sort of unconscious and what's going on, and I'm with you. We don't necessarily know all the answers, and this accumulation of knowledge, fascination that you have, I share. This whole constant learning. What else is there? Give me more. I've got this huge thirst to understand. What is it you're going to do with your knowledge?
Great question. I guess what I want to do is share it and get it out there. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do at the moment as well. That, if I like listen to a podcast that's really helpful, or a book, or anything to do with health or climate change, or just like life perspective, I try and share it in the hope that somebody else will find it helpful as well. So I guess I like to use my knowledge. It's that service thing again of, okay, how can I share this knowledge with other people so that it benefits them? Um, and it's interesting because the word doctor actually means teacher in Latin, and I think um, education is something that's so important, and I kind of see myself as, I want to be someone that is an educator, um, and really sharing, sharing the learning is what I want to do with it. I think there's some slight drawbacks of having this like huge thirst for knowledge, which is that you're constantly wanting to learn new things, but also sometimes I have to catch myself, um, because I think that I don't know enough to go and do something, or there's that phrase, isn't there, that kind of the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. And so the more you learn, you're like, oh my goodness, I actually only understand like this like 0.0001% minuscule amount of all the knowledge there is out there. And an acceptance, like you were saying about acceptance, that we're never going to know everything. Um, and learning to accept that, and that, well, this is what I know now. And that's the, like as a scientist, it should really be accepting of that fact, because we might think something now and then 5 years later the research shows us something completely different. So things that I'm saying now might be completely wrong later on. So it's accepting that, okay, well, this is right for right now, and that things might change later on.
It reminds me of that phrase of Carl Sagan, who said the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. So just because we don't know about it doesn't mean that it's not the truth, or just because we can't prove it doesn't mean it's not there. And with the curse of knowledge that you've shared in terms of holding you back because there's so many things you don't know, what else could there be? But also the curse of knowledge in the sense that there's assumptions that you make that everybody knows things, because when you learn it, then you take that on board and you assume that everyone else does. So it absolutely can inhibit in many ways, but it also does give you so much opportunity to, as you say, your vision has grown and it's expanded and it's expanded and you're taking on the next step, and the journey is not necessarily clear, but that's okay, because this is just the next step that you feel comfortable in making, that is going to make a difference. So yeah, exciting times.
Yeah, it is exciting. I'm in the midst of everything that happens when you're about to make a chapter change. And yeah, moving from one part of the country to another as well. So yeah, lots of emotions. And I think a big lesson for me has been that even when you're making a change for good, and it's the right thing, there can still be a lot of grief that comes with that, which I don't think I'd actually fully appreciated previously. That, oh, even with good things and expected things, because life throws curveballs, there's unexpected things. And when people, like if someone passes away, or there's like someone loses their job, or a relationship loss, with those things we expect there to be grief. I don't think as a society we always, or maybe we do and I just hadn't really appreciated it before, but given kind of people making comments of like, oh, but you must be really excited, and that I'm sensing that people aren't really aware of this, that there's so many mixed emotions. And yeah, let people grieve things, because it's not just grief of things, it's also a grief of a part of me. The pediatrician Nuthana is not going to exist once I go and become public health Nuthana. um, and the acceptance of that as well. But we're constantly changing and growing, and I kind of think of life as like sort of like a game where there's like different levels. And so like once you get to one level, then like it's like, okay, then there's like more lessons. It's just never ending. Like there's always more lessons to learn and more growth. um and we were speaking about knowledge, but I don't think it is just from knowledge that, like, I just wanted to make the point that it's not just about, oh, I'll go and do this course and I'll read this book or watch this film, or you can learn things from anywhere and everywhere. And I definitely feel that every person that we come into contact with, we can learn something from them, they can learn something from us. out and about in nature. I'm not sure what the trees might be learning from me, but I'm certainly learning from them. That you can learn things anywhere, if that's what you're looking for. I can't go on a walk without like having an adventure, or like coming back with like 5 lessons. But maybe that's because I go out looking for adventure and lessons. That's what I find. So yeah, I think just accepting that we're always changing and growing, and there's always going to be mixed emotions with that, and I think it's just a never ending journey.
It's a really key point you make. And often these are associated with life stages and transitions, and an identity shift when you're moving from one identity to another. Particularly, a lot of people find this in their sort of midlife, and then again when they get to retirement age, this shift of identity. Well, who am I if I'm not this? But it's particularly when it's attached to work. But I found that with purpose, this is also the case. So with the evolving purpose, it's like, well, that was what I was doing. So how does that now help me to shape what it is I want to do going forward? And it's an emotional shift and move, and because it matters. And what you have illustrated so beautifully is your ability to embody a sort of walking embodiment when you're out on your walk, how you are able to find meaning and joy in every moment. And that is in itself a gift, because not everybody even looks or knows to look. And this is what, from my perspective of helping people to understand how to live more purposefully and with more meaningfully, that is possible, and that meaning is found in every moment. And you spoke about how you're coming up towards your birthday and you're being more reflective. For me, I talk about how the why and that emotional significance comes from reflection, and that the purpose is then created through your subsequent action. So they tie together, this reflection with action, which is why I have my episodes and I talk about that. It's not rocket science, but it's this connection of understanding, of bringing together all these pieces of this jigsaw that becomes our life. So, oh, Nuthana, it's been such a delight to go on this journey. And I know there's so much more. So I look forward to following your journey and where you take this in this next role, and where that role then subsequently evolves. How would people connect and follow you, perhaps social media? Where's the best way for them to reach out?
Well, everywhere, and do try and post all over social media, just to try and reach more people. But yeah, firstly to say thank you so much, and yeah, I'm really sad that that's over, because I actually really enjoyed it. And I was telling Amy before we recorded, because I host a podcast myself, that it's always a bit daunting. I'm not used to being the one that's the interviewee. I'm much more comfortable being the interviewer because I'm more used to that. But I loved that. It was wonderful. I'm kind of sad that it's over now. But in terms of where people can reach me, so this is where I have to remember what all my handles are, but I will send them to Amy to put them in the show notes. But I'm at Dr. Nuthana on Twitter and on Instagram. I'm Dr. Nuthana PB on LinkedIn. And the podcast that I host at the moment is called the Medical Women Podcast. It aims to support and empower women in medicine, but I'm sure the episodes would be helpful for lots of people. But yes, I'm also kind of thinking about chapter change with that. I'm not sure how much longer I'm going to keep doing it, just because it takes up a lot of my time and energy, and yeah, my whys and my purpose are changing, which again is sad, because it's not easy for us to, well, maybe it's for some people, but for me, I find it really hard to say bye to things that I really love and that are making a difference to people. But I think it's important that as we grow and change, so do our purpose and our choices and decisions that we make.
Yeah, and it's such a key thing: acceptance, responsibility, and knowing when something is ready to evolve into the next thing. So evolution and change have been a huge part of this conversation today. So thank you for bringing the reality that sits behind that, those challenges, the knowledge that you have shared in terms of when in your heart that it's time to challenge the status quo and really capture what's next for you to then move into that space. So thank you for illustrating that. It really has been a pleasure. And please do come back and tell us what's next and what's happened. So thank you for that. What are your final words, Nuthana?
Oh, final words. Well, I'd definitely love to come back and tell you, because who knows where I'll end up. Purpose and why might have completely changed, but we'll see. I guess a couple of things. So one thing that I wanted to say was that it's not always easy. I mentioned earlier that it's taken me a couple of years to make this change. Sometimes our purpose and our why can change, but that doesn't mean that it's easy. And within the NHS, you're kind of you're on this like treadmill of like going down this path, and it is unusual for people to change from one and go to another. So if I'd carried on within paediatrics, I'd almost be a consultant, but I'm going kind of back to the beginning of a different training program. And I'm lucky that I am able to make that decision and go and do it. Not everybody is able to do that, but it is something that's unusual and not easy. And so I'd say to anyone listening, if you're feeling like, oh, my purpose has changed, I want to go and do this, but it feels really hard, just because it's hard doesn't mean that it's the wrong thing. Sometimes the right thing is also the hardest thing. I think Dumbledore says it in Harry Potter. I don't think he says it in the books. I've read the book so many times, but in the films, there's definitely a bit where he says, dark times are coming. We have to do what's right, not what's easy. So that's just something that I thought might be helpful to hear. And another quote that popped into my head. I remember quotes, but I find it harder to remember who said them. So apologies, I can't remember who said this. But I remember reading that this phrase that life has to be lived forwards, but is only understood backwards. And I find that really helpful, particularly at times where there's, life throws you a curveball and you're like, I have no idea why this is happening and why me, and this isn't fair. And at the time, it's really hard to make sense of it. But when I look back at certain things that happened in my life, I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense why I had to go and do this and then this. And I'm very grateful for all of those things. So I think that's also part of why our purpose and our whys change. And it might not make sense while we're on the journey, but looking backwards, all the dots kind of connect together. It's really hard for that when you're in the storm. It's really hard, but then once you're kind of in calmer season and looking back, you realize why that was what happened, and that was I always kind of think that what's meant to happen happens for a reason, and then if you don't do things in a certain way, then it wouldn't have got you to where you are. And we don't always notice it in the moment. There's so much serendipity, but it always seems to make sense to me afterwards. And maybe I just use that as a coping mechanism, but I find that really helpful, that particularly when there is some sort of unexpected curveball, that I find it quite calming that, okay, right now it feels awful and I can't make sense of it, but one day I will look back and it will make sense. And I just remind myself that when I look back at things that have happened, it does all make sense later.
What value have you gained from tuning into Focus on Why today? What are your reflections with actions? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or via LinkedIn and share how Focus on Why has made a difference to you. Your feedback not only will inspire others, but will help them to discover how Focus on Why has created powerful ripple effects. Let's continue the conversation. Connect with me on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook or X, join the Focus on Why Facebook group, and sign up for my weekly newsletter, Friday Focus, to keep in touch. All the links are in the show notes. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why.